Hi friends, it's Roger Kalia, Music Director of Symphony New Hampshire, and I hope that you are all doing well. I would like to invite you to our upcoming live stream concert titled Mozart and Piazzolla, which will take place on Friday, January 29th at 7:30 p.m. You can gain access to our live stream by visiting our website at symphonynh.org. For this concert, the orchestra will perform two wonderful works by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. His Flute Concerto No. 1 in G major featuring Symphony New Hampshire's principal flute, Kathy Boyd, and his Divertimento in D major, K136. 2021 marks the 100th anniversary of the birth of the tango master Astor Piazzolla, and we will perform his Libertango, as well as a work by Osvaldo Golijov titled Last Round, which is a tribute to Piazzolla. Piazzolla, the last great tango composer, was at the peak of his creativity when a stroke killed him in 1992. He left us, in the words of the old tango, without saying goodbye. And on that day, the musical face of Buenos Aires was abruptly frozen. Piazzolla was known for his virtuosic playing on an instrument called the bandoneon. The bandoneon is a small accordion-like instrument without a keyboard that was invented in Germany in the 19th century to serve as a portable church organ, and which, after finding its home in the bordellos of Buenos Aires slums in the 1920s, returned to Europe as a part of Paris's high society in the 1930s. Since then, it has become an essential instrument for any tango ensemble. Inspired by multiple musical traditions, Argentinian composer Osvaldo Golijov grew up immersed in classical chamber music, Jewish liturgical and klezmer music, and the new tango of Astor Piazzolla. Golijov's Last Round for string orchestra was commissioned by the Birmingham Contemporary Music Group and premiered in the fall of 1996. Here is how Golijov described Last Round. He says, "I composed Last Round, the title borrowed from a short story on boxing by Julio Cortázar, as an imaginary chance for Piazzolla's spirit to fight one more time. The piece is conceived as an idealized bandoneon. There are two movements. The first represents the act of a violent compression of the instrument, and the second, a final seemingly endless opening sigh. It is actually a fantasy over the refrain of the song My Beloved Buenos Aires, composed by the legendary Carlos Gardel in the 1930s. But Last Round is also a sublimated tango dance. Two quartets confront each other, separated by the focal bass, with violins and violas standing up as in the traditional tango orchestras. The bows fly in the air as inverted legs in crisscrossed choreography, always attracting and repelling each other, always in danger of clashing, always avoiding it with the immutability that can only be acquired by transforming hot passion into pure pattern." Next on our program is Mozart's Flute Concerto No. 1 in G major. For flute players, the Mozart Flute Concerto No. 1 is a warhorse in the repertoire, and the work often appears on orchestral auditions throughout the world. I am very excited to be collaborating with our principal flute, Kathy Boyd, on this beautiful work. Mozart wrote the concerto in G major, K313, in Mannheim in 1778 on commission from the Dutch flutist Ferdinand de Jong, for whom he also wrote the concerto in D major, K314, arranged from the C major oboe concerto, and 3 flute quartets. Like most of Mozart's works, his G major flute concerto was composed for a specific and practical purpose. In this case, the purpose was to, frankly, make some money that he needed at the time for the long and expensive professional trip from Salzburg to Paris. Mozart and his mother had gotten as far as Mannheim by the end of October 1777. The Mannheim court was not especially interested in the 21-year-old composer, but at last a wealthy amateur flutist, Ferdinand de Jong, came forward with a commission for a group of easy flute concertos and flute quartets. Mozart actually disliked the flute as a solo instrument, so despite his financial need, he procrastinated. As a composer of solo instruments, we often think of Mozart's beautiful and virtuosic violin concerti and piano concerti rather than his flute concerti. Despite Mozart's distaste for the instrument, Mozart composed a concerto of great beauty and depth. The 25-minute concerto ended up being far beyond the amateur scope he had bargained for, an artistic delight for flutists and their audiences for 2 centuries to come. The opening movement is stately and march-like, combined with a certain degree of elegance and clarity, as in all of Mozart's great works. There is a great deal of call and response between the solo part and the orchestra as well. The flute is given virtuosic figures that are light and sprightly, which create a sense of forward momentum throughout the movement. The second movement is the crown of the work. It is a gorgeous and lyrical adagio, which displays Mozart's mastery of melody. Interestingly enough, Mozart includes 2 flutes as part of the orchestra, the only movement in which they appear out of the 3. The strings are muted while the flute sings above the orchestra. The third movement is cast in the form of a French rondo, which begins with the soloist, and all of the other movements start with an orchestral introduction, except for this one. The intervening episodes, brilliant and virtuosic to start with, grow progressively richer in their musical content. The last episode concludes with a free cadenza leading to the final return of the rondo refrain that ends quietly. Next on our program is Piazzolla's Libertango. As I mentioned earlier, 2021 is the 100th anniversary of Astor Piazzolla, who has been described as the world's foremost composer of tango music. His works revolutionized the traditional tango into a new style called Nuevo Tango, which incorporates elements from jazz and classical music. Born in the coastal resort city of Mar del Plata in 1921, Piazzolla spent 15 years growing up in New York City before the family returned to Argentina. During his time in New York, he learned the bandoneon. He also met tango musician and bandleader Carlos Gardel and studied music with Bela Wilda, a student of Rachmaninoff. From 1941 until 1946, while earning a living playing in tango clubs, he started studying with Alberto Ginastera. In 1954, he traveled with his wife to Paris to study with the great composer Nadia Boulanger. At the same time, while in Paris, he heard the jazz bari sax player Jerry Mulligan and his octet. It was this experience that led Piazzolla to break with tradition and form his own tango octet, which incorporated jazz improvisation and composed counterpoint, similar to what he had studied with Boulanger. This would eventually become Nuevo Tango, also known as New Tango. His most famous work is the Libertango, which was composed while Piazzolla was living in Rome. We will be performing an arrangement by Jeff Scott, which will feature a woodwind quintet comprised of musicians from Symphony, New Hampshire. We're going to close the concert with Mozart's Divertimento for strings in D major, K136. This work was composed in the winter of 1772 in Salzburg, following 2 extended periods in Italy. A divertimento is a piece that is composed purely to entertain. Incidental pieces such as these were the easiest way to earn a quick fee. Mozart was only 16 years old when he composed the work, along with 2 other string divertimenti. The title, Divertimento, on the autograph is not even in Mozart's hand. He probably wrote the Divertimento for one of the musical evenings held in the homes of Salzburg's leading residents, at which he frequently performed on both keyboard and violin. The 3-movement structure for strings follows the pattern of the Italian Sinfonia. It also nods in the direction of Haydn and J.C. Bach. The more familiar 18th century Divertimento form had a larger number of movements, including 2 minuets and often 2 marches, whereas this work only has 3 movements, which is more typical of the Italian string quartet and sinfonia. The first movement is marked allegro, and there is a great deal of virtuosity and fast-moving figures, especially in the violins. The middle section goes into the minor key with chromatic harmonies, which sound almost romantic in character, something that you would most likely hear in late Beethoven rather than Mozart. The second movement is marked andante, meaning not too slow. This is a warm and elegant movement which provides an opportunity for the violins to really sing. It is almost operatic in character. The third movement is marked presto. It is an ebullient and fun movement with hints of silences, and as we know, Mozart was quite the jokester. There is also a workout for the second violins in this movement. Typically, the first violins get the workout, but in the third movement, the second violins have the bulk of the work. There is also a great little fugue in the middle of the piece. I want to thank all of you for joining us, and I hope that you will join us virtually for our live stream on Friday, January 29th at 7:30 p.m. More information can be found on our website at symphonynh.org. Take care, everyone, and be well.